into the intercultural elements and kind of veer off the original source text, a big part of colonial life is that there were always people going off to join tribes. People would leave New England tribal life and they would go join the American Indians. The reverse almost never happened. You would never have an American Indian who'd say, you know what, I'm tired of hunting. I want to be adopted by a New England family and go till the soil. This is a big theme in a recent book called Sebastian Junger called Tribes, where he talks about, with our isolation we feel in the 21st century, what are positive things we can see in the past of tribal life where people seem somewhat content. And his point being that throughout colonial life, from the first encounters with the Pilgrims or Plymouth Colony and Roanoke up to the ends of tribal life in the end of the 19th century and early 20th century, you had white people running off and joining the tribes, and they could marry in. They would be accepted in the tribe. They wouldn't be considered inferior for being white. And if you're going to follow a theme of a subversion of the social order that this movie wants to do and really go off the rails, then have the two of them run off and join an Indian tribe. That would Dimmsdale and Hester Prynne. That's completely out of the source text, but if they want to abandon the message of the original and make it about radical individuality, tying in them joining an American Indian tribe where they're doing something radically different from their original life, that would be one way to do that in the 17th century if you're going to do it in any way possible. Not just the two of them create their own little, I don't know, free love civilization in South Carolina, whatever they're going to say. So that's one way I could see it making work. But then it just gets even more ridiculous, where at the end goes with like Gary Oldman and Demi Moore wearing bear skins and, or, you know, actually maybe if the movie got even more ridiculous and leaned into its ridiculousness, then it gets into the realm of pure camp, and I like pure camp. So yeah, I think that's what would make it better. They join an Indian tribe. It allows you to historically accurately subvert a social order if you choose to do so, and it's funny in a ridiculous way. There you go.
I think the way I would make it better is during the publicity phase of the movie, Demi Moore said something to the effect that the novel by Nathaniel Hawthorne just doesn't make good film. And so that's why they had to really radically change it. So there was a mini series done by Masterpiece Theater that was and Demi Moore said that the book would be better translated as a mini series. And there was a mini series done on Masterpiece Theater from PBS that in 1979 that was about 4 hours long. That was really the book acted out, and it was, I mean, that was like one of the ones, if you read that book probably in the 80s or the 90s or probably even to the 2000s, your English teacher would shuffle over and pull the VHS out of there in high school and play that miniseries. I guarantee it, your English teacher wasn't going to pull out the VHS of the 1995 Scarlet letter with Demi Moore.
Yeah, that would be the edited made for TV version, definitely. And then
then forget about it. I think that to make this a better movie, you don't have to strictly go by the novel, but making a period piece about the Puritans and how the Puritans reacted to different social things that were going on and their conflicts with the Native Americans and the founding of the Massachusetts Bay and the Plymouth colonies. That would be a pretty interesting movie that I think you could make today and that people would watch. But this, I hate to say, but this garbage of this movie with Demi Moore, just surface level themes, throwaway lines, a little skin, and I just don't know who they made this movie for.
Hey everyone, Scott here. One more brief word from our sponsors. Yeah, this shares a lot in common with our John Wayne movie, The Conqueror, where The problem is we're thinking about this logically. You have to see the eyes of a Hollywood producer where, hey, I can attach a star to this. I can get funding, even if the idea is completely stupid. That's how money works and deals work. But to follow up on your idea about Puritan society, I think that there is something that could be done historically. Puritans they're not depicted accurately in fiction. I think some of the reason is we have the major works of American literature, like the Scarlet Letter or the Crucible in the 1950s. The Puritans aren't looked at for historical reasons, but they're looked as an allegory of some of the problems in the American psyche that were there at the beginning, and we're still wrestling with them today. So as a vehicle for allegory, they work beautifully. But actually looking into Puritan society, it's not as simple as they wear pilgrim garb and they're all listening to Jonathan Edwards' Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God and giving each other the skunk eye over predeterminism and Calvinism and who's the elect that will go to heaven and everyone else is hellbound. Yeah, that's definitely there, but the religiosity, it might not be any worse than what you would see in England in different places. Maybe you have a little bit more faithful adherence. I did an episode on my podcast a while ago about the Salem witch trials, and there's a lot of scholarship about it, but some of the main points is that, was it religiosity that got out of hand? I mean, absolutely. There's no question, and the language that was used to describe it and demonic possession was a part of it. But to understand the origin of it, a lot of it had to do with politics and a governor of the Plymouth colony that completely got out of hand. So it's sort of a cautionary tale of local politics. And there's lots and lots of other mitigating factors. I won't get into it now. And when you look at the early pilgrims around the time of Plymouth Rock and the first Thanksgiving and other things, the pilgrims are interesting because they're actually minor players in tribal warfare and politics that are going on. And their translator, we call him Squanto or Esquanto, who was taken captive. He was in England for a number of years, and that's how he was able to learn English. He and some others are using the pilgrims as pawns in this Game of Thrones-esque diplomatic game that's going on with the American Indians there and tribal issues, and they're seen as useful, so that's why they're not wiped out. Smallpox also helps out, too, for wiping out the Indians there, unfortunately. But there's this whole game of politics going on that they barely understand, the pilgrims, I mean, of which they're barely a pawn. And there's constant dealings with American Indians. Is there bigotry and warfare happening? Yes. Is there also trade happening? And they're trying to understand as these aliens and pioneers in a strange land? Yes. So there's to think of them as sort of like these, I don't know, like these Cossacks on the Russian frontier in a way. Much more hardier and tougher. They're not just sitting around in their hats with their buckles on the front with pure white linens. Life was rough. You're directly on the frontier. It was dirtier and grimier than we would think of. So actually doing the Puritans right in history, I can't really think of something that's accurate. And I think the reason why it would be so hard to do is because we associate the Puritans with literary motifs like the Crucible or the Scarlet Letter that are so hard to overcome. It would take something to turn the dial that would be very difficult to do. So I would be curious in that story of a retelling of, the pilgrims arriving, but from the vantage point of the Indians. But it's not even so much about the Indians. It's this tribal politics game going on of which they are a small part. So that's my idea.
Yeah, a small part that they don't really understand. Everybody has their own motives and their own desires. That would be a lot more interesting than what we normally get. But I think, like you said, there's an expectation of the Puritans are a certain way, the Pilgrims are a certain way, and it would be very difficult to get people out of that mind frame.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I can't think of anything else for the Scarlet Letter. Do you recommend people watch it, Steve, just out of comedy, or what do you think?
I think that this one could be one if you wanted to have a couple of drinks on a Saturday night and just have a really good laugh. I bet you this one might even have a riff tracks to it, where the guys from Mystery Science Theater 3000 make fun of the movie throughout the Have you heard of those?
Oh, I love those. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't recommend those highly enough. The funniest one is on Twilight.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it rips us to shreds. But the Vin Diesel movie Triple X, that's also really good. I've Point Break, that's a great one. Yeah, absolutely great series. What would be a drinking game, and what would you have to drink? Probably
with the these and the thous and just like the phony faux Puritan stuff that they do. That's really, it's not quite Puritan. I don't know if it's Shakespearean, like what they're exactly going for, but that was pretty bad.
Yeah, depending on how hammered you want to get. Every time Demi Moore's accent is horrible, take a drink. Every time there's a gratuitous, sensual, soft lighting body shot, take a drink. What would you drink? I mean, Puritans aren't known for their drink, but the English were swimming in gin at this point in the 17th century. So what did Native Americans drink?
I don't know if the Northeastern had a alcoholic beverage or not.
Yeah, a lot of the problems a lot of it had to do with trade later on. Maybe if I had, I'm not really sure about that. I mean, humanity's really resourceful at finding fermentables and make things to drink, even if it's not great. We talked about horse milk with the Mongols and fermenting it. So
I think like the ones further in the South, like the Incans had like a fermented corn beverage, palenque, pulque or something like that.
Pulque, yeah. I when I was down in Mexico, I tracked down some of that. It was a ceremonial drink of the Aztecs. It tastes kind of meat. It's like milk, but it tastes beany and meaty. If that really sounds good to you, then pulque, but that's getting, very far south with a very different indigenous culture. So I don't know. I mean, for the time period of this, if there were kind of a naughty Puritan who liked to take a nip of the drink from back in England, it'd be gin.
Yeah.
Can't really water
down rum or something.
I don't know what you drink at Thanksgiving time, since that's associated with Pilgrims and Puritans. Kind of spiked punch. So there you go, everyone. This is our first drinking game that we have with an episode, and it was on the Scarlet Letter of all things.
And if you have some ideas for movies, definitely let us know. And we'll probably wind up having some polls on these movies to see if somebody really loves them out there. I want to meet the person who really loved this movie.
Yeah, that's I'll have to look for a positive review if it exists on the internet.
And we'll talk to you next time.
So that is the episode for today. As always, I want to thank the Knowlton's Rangers, especially our spy masters, Bill Ivey, Joyce Normant, Tyler from Colorado, Josh Reddick, Baron Fraser, Chris from Maine, Carl from Norway, Moondoggy from Ohio, Rick Knowlton, Vic and Irene, Mike from New York, Michelle, and Marlene. I'll explain what that is in a second. If you like the show and want to help it grow, there are 4 easy ways for you to do it. 1, like and subscribe to the show on the podcast player of your choice. This helps spread the word about the show. 2, join our Facebook group. Here we can keep the discussion going about new episodes, and you can talk about what you like and didn't like. And you can find this group if you just search for History Unplugged on Facebook. 3, we have an online store with t-shirts, phone covers, and other accessories featuring awesomely bad history puns that were crowdsourced by you, the audience. And you can find that if you go to public.com and look for History Unplugged, or you just go to historyonthenet.com and look for our store there. 4, and this is really the best way to dive deep with History Unplugged, and that's to become one of the Knowlton's Rangers. If you know your American history, you know the Knowlton's Rangers were an elite spy and reconnaissance group in the American Revolutionary War, but it's also the name of the membership program of History Unplugged. You can join at 3 levels. If you join at the level of Scout, you can hear all the episodes of History Unplugged completely ad-free and get early access to new episodes, at least a week early. If you join at the Intelligence Officer level, you get special bonus episodes, like a 10-part series on the World War II hero Audie Murphy, a multi-part series called Ottoman Lives about different people in the Ottoman Empire, and a series called Rendezvous with Death that looks at biographical profiles of Americans who went to fight in World War I before America entered the war. The last level is Spy Master, where you get all that stuff, but you also get 3 hardcover history books: Forging a President, How the Wild West Created Teddy Roosevelt, Race to the Top of the World, Richard Byrd and the First Flight to the North Pole, and The Last Fighter Pilot, the true story of the final combat mission of World War II. Another bonus is you can choose a history topic for me to focus on for an entire episode that can go up to an hour, and I'll answer whatever question you have for me, and you get a shout out at the end of each episode. If you want to learn how to become a member of the Knowlton's Rangers, go to Patreon.